Well, welcome to the podcast. Super glad that y'all are here today. If you want to introduce yourself, and kind of we'll get started there.
Yeah, I'll go first. Hey guys, I'm Caleb from One Man's Vintage.
And I'm Anna from One Man's Vintage.
Awesome. Well, glad y'all are here. I'm trying to think of the first time I actually saw y'all stuff. Either it was an article that was out, either the Huntsville Business Journal that I actually have printed off, or it was maybe, I think WAFF or somebody did like a news article. Some news station did a little like video of y'all.
Oh yeah, was it Tennessee Valley Living?
I think so, something like that. So like I remember seeing y'all, and then we were talking about it off air, but I was in the Clinton Road shops where y'all's location's at. And I remember seeing it in the window, and it was after we had already scheduled this, so I was super excited to kind of have y'all on. And I like walked by, I was like, "That's who I'm having on the podcast." And I like sat there with my wife, and I was like, "Look, I'm having them on the podcast." She's like, "Oh, that's awesome." I was like, "I know." And so it was a cool moment to like see it and then kind of like have this conversation.
Yeah, put it all together.
Yeah. So if y'all want to kind of so I know that neither one of y'all are originally from Huntsville. I know you kind of. You were born here, but then kind of grew up in New York, and then you're originally from the Chicago area. So very different than Huntsville. So let's talk a little bit about kind of what your background was and kind of what ultimately ended you up in the Huntsville area.
Yeah, for sure. I'll go ahead and start. So like you kind of said, I was born in Huntsville. I have family in Huntsville. And then just for my dad's job, we just moved around a lot. So we ended up in Rochester, New York, upstate New York. And I was there for middle school up to my freshman year of high school.
Okay.
And then I moved to Illinois and finished high school there, and then came back down to Huntsville to go to UAH for engineering.
Did you think you were going to end up in Huntsville, or did you just like wanted to pursue an engineering degree and just kind of saw Huntsville as like, oh, maybe?
Not at all. It was funny because my dad's job, once again, he was in Huntsville, and he kind of calls me up one day, and he's like, "There's a really good engineering school here in Huntsville." I was like, "Where's Huntsville?" He's like,
"You were born here."
And I was like,
"You were born here." Like, I don't remember.
I've never been back.
Never been.
So I was like, okay, yeah. So I went and visit him one summer and got to go and check out UAH, kind of tour the campus. And I really liked it, and I thought it was cool. My family's moving back down to Huntsville anyway, so I could be closer to my family. So that's kind of how I ended up back here.
Perfect. And what about you? I know you went to Mississippi State for your undergrad, so talk a little bit about everything.
So my original goal in life was to be veterinarian.
Okay.
So loved animals, loved wildlife, was always into, the recycling aspect of stuff. And so I remember I was looking at vet schools, and I'm in Chicago. I'm in Aurora. It's a suburb about 45 minutes away from main Chicagoland area. And I Googled Mississippi State. And I'm like, okay, they have a vet program. Seems cool. A little bit different than, a suburb life, city life. So it was a big culture shock when I got to Mississippi State. Then like I said, I'm really into like the recycling aspect, into like wildlife, into like preservation and stuff like that. So that's how I kind of got into the South, and I haven't left since.
Yeah. And so y'all met, I guess, in college. So it's like, Mississippi State and Huntsville, obviously not far from each other, but obviously not right down the street. Mm-hmm. It's like you went to Calhoun, you went to UAH. You were in two separate states. So how did that kind of happen?
We actually have a mutual friend. So my friend that I kind of knew from UAH, and we had hung out, and her friend from Mississippi State, her roommate, they were best friends.
Okay.
And they grew up together. So
shout out to Ashlyn and Devin.
Yes.
Perfect.
I forget how, but we all ended up hanging out one day.
Yeah.
Like they came from Mississippi State, or we went down to Mississippi. And that's kind of how we met. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just kind of hit it off from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but obviously both of y'all's backgrounds are in two very different things compared to what you do now with One Man's Vintage.
Yes.
It's not like you had like a business degree. You had an electrical engineering degree.
Yes.
You had I actually had printed it off, wildlife, fisheries, and agriculture degree from Mississippi State.
Yes, yeah.
And now you're running a business and doing vintage shells. Kind of the complete opposite.
Yes, completely different for sure.
Very, very different. And this sort of all started, I guess, in 2019, kind of right before COVID. But obviously, sort of, I would assume sort of your interest in vintage is something that's been kind of probably was going on throughout college, going on throughout high school. Sort of when did you both kind of get into that and kind of see sort of an interest in it?
You want to take that one? You go first.
So I always grew up thrifting, going to Goodwill's with my mom. We loved going to garage sales. So probably the earliest memory I have was probably when I was like 7, 8, going every Saturday morning when they had the community big yard sales and kind of just, seeing the latest Game Boys. Well, at the time they were latest to me, but, finding Game Boys, or like I was really into like, Barbies and Bratz and stuff like that. So it's like, oh yeah, let's see if I can like find some toys for myself and everything. But then that kind of, went into high school, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with Macklemore, with his, iconic thrift shop, I think, song. So that kind of also like threw me into going into like vintage shopping for myself and kind of expressing myself in, old school windbreakers and like, the mom jeans and stuff. So I've always had that background since high school. In college, it was a little different to maintain. There weren't as many thrift stores and kind of like that.
And you're on a lower budget. Your parents aren't paying for it. So
Exactly.
You're like, maybe I want to go to the thrift store, but if I go, then I'm going to want to buy something. And then I'm going to have no money for food. So it's like,
pick and choose your
right. It's ramen every night.
Yeah, it's like I'm kind of full from breakfast, so I might be okay to miss lunch.
Right.
So when did you kind of get into vintage?
Yeah, so
and thrifting and all that?
I guess I was always kind of into like the retro vibes because my dad grew up in Chicago. So he would always tell me stories about Michael Jordan, and like he would have their gear. And my grandma, she would collect all the old Bulls stuff growing up. Like she was in South Side Chicago, so she went to like try to go to every game she could. Huge fan, so she kind of just naturally gained clothes and apparel and accessories from there. So then my dad would have that and would be wearing it. And I'm like, that's cool, Dad. Can I borrow that leather Chicago Bulls jacket? He was like, sure, it doesn't fit me. So I kind of had always like been drawn to like the 90s sportswear.
Yeah.
So then college kind of comes around, and I think the same thing with Anna, kind of it was a sustainable, cheaper way to kind of get clothes
that were new to you. So it was like, I'm getting new clothes, but you were able to kind of upcycle that item that, either someone's no longer wanting or that might need a little fix. You're able to fix it and kind of patch it and still make it kind of your own thing.
Exactly. And find unique pieces instead of going to H&M, Forever 21 and finding a lot of pieces that are mass produced. A lot of people have them, good basics, but if you want something unique, something that talks to you as an individual, I definitely was drawn to that side of thrifting.
And I mean, as far as Huntsville's concerned, I mean, there's quite a few thrift stores around Huntsville that you can kind of shop. I mean, was there a fair amount in Starkville, or was that sort of a kind of a little bit of a harder thing to find?
Yeah, it was a little bit more of a harder thing. I think there was maybe one good thrift store.
Oh, wow.
But sometimes towards the end of the year, obviously, college students are leaving
town. There's dump everything.
That was the best time to go. It was during the beginning of the school year, then during the end, just to kind of see like what were left over from the summertime or what people don't want to take back with them.
Yeah.
But as you said before, in Huntsville, there's like so many thrift stores and to kind of go around in both men and women's sections.
So I mean, in 2019, I guess right before the pandemic hit, you sort of started One Man's Vintage. But obviously, you I mean, to do what One Man's Vintage is doing, you really have to have a pretty big collection of stuff. So when did that collection, when did the initial idea of like, hey, let's try to start selling our stuff that we're finding, people are enjoying the stuff that we wear, they're wanting it something like that for themselves. When did that initial idea happen? When did the idea like, hey, this name for One Man's Vintage, and then obviously the initial, hey, let's make a store, let's make a website, let's make something to sell it to somebody, let's post it on Instagram. When did take me through that timeline?
So it actually, One Man's Vintage technically started, I don't think many people know this, it technically started as One Man's Thrift Shop.
Okay.
That's what we were known on online on Depop, eBay. And it started when we started dating. I think it was about maybe six months, maybe to a year. Yeah. It was like right at the first year we started dating. I was
like 2018, 2017. So
okay, before
like a couple years before you established. Okay,
and it kind of came from Anna's idea. She said, "Hey, you're finding a lot of cool clothes. We're finding clothes. Have you heard of Depop?" I'm like, I don't know what Depop is. I mean, I know eBay. She's like, it's like an eBay, but for the young generation. Like that's what they're looking for.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, let's do it. Let's start selling on Depop, and we built up a following from there. We were top sellers at one point.
Wow.
And we were like, it was like their verified.
And was this all while y'all were both in college.
Yes.
Yes, I was still at college at the
And
point,
I
and you had
was
just
almost
graduated.
Either just graduated or I was about to graduate. It's like right on the tail end of my career in college. And so we're kind of doing that on the side. And then you moved in. You finished. You moved in. And
the pandemic hits.
And we have too many clothes in our apartment, in our 2-bedroom apartment. And we're like, some of this needs to go.
We got to figure out something.
So that's when we really started ramping up and trying really hard to move a lot of clothes, sell a lot, doing pop-ups at like Low Mill, the outdoor market.
Okay, yeah.
We were pop-up there. And that's how we started meeting some of our friends, some of our customers. They would come in and be like, this is so cool. Do you guys have a shop? And we're like, nope, this is
this is it.
It's from our apartment. There's way more in that apartment.
Yeah.
So they're like, maybe you guys should think about it. So that's kind of how it started before the shop existed.
Because the shop didn't exist before the pandemic. You opened it up after the or at like kind of the tail end of the pandemic.
Tail end, what, 2022? 2022.
So you
were upstairs.
So you've been there at the Clinton Road shops is where you've been.
Yes.
Okay, but like you've changed locations there as you've grown in size, you've probably had to scale to a bigger location.
Yes.
I mean, I think for anyone that's I guess listening and kind of has followed the podcast for a little while, we've had Goody Vault, who was a vintage store here in Huntsville for a few years.
Yes, Manny.
Manny on the podcast a couple times, and so like my knowledge of that is a little bit, but obviously I'm hoping to learn some more today. But so you officially sort of make it One Man's Vintage right before pandemic. What did the pandemic do to the business? Did it grow it because there was people shopping online, or did you kind of like see that you were holding stock a little bit longer than you were before?
Go ahead, take that one.
It actually kind of helped our sales.
Really?
So obviously, a lot of people were scared to kind of go out to thrift stores and to kind of venture out, try to find their own thing. So that's when online sales, just with even secondhand clothing and online sales with everything in general, just skyrocketed. And there was a point in time that we were consistently selling and not be able to hold on to as much as we thought we would. We had, and kind of our inventory was kind of depleting a little bit quicker than we had thought. But when the outdoor market started with Low Mill and stuff, it was kind of hard to curate a collection to a bigger crowd. And that's when we had questions like, oh, I would love to shop your whole collection. And it's kind of awkward to have people be like, oh yeah, here's my apartment address. Like you're more than welcome to come in.
Go there.
But during COVID, it was kind of an idea of us like, oh, we probably should really think into where we should make a home base
100%,
and kind of have, maybe even by appointments or, because I know Manny at the time was only by appointments at some times.
Yeah, because he was there.
And we were like, that might be a good idea to look into, but it wasn't a pressing issue at the time, because we were like, okay, we're still consistent with online sales. We're, still shipping out everything. When USPS kind of loses your packages every once in a while, it's a...
that's not fun to deal with.
So like during the pandemic, was most of your sales as far as online through your website, or were you seeing a lot more through Depop and eBay and stuff like that? Like where would you say the percentage of your, like majority of your percentage of your sales came from for online? Even maybe, is that the same of what it is today?
I would say, so during the pandemic, we actually did not have a website. It was all Depop. It was all Depop, eBay. Those were our two main channels we sold online, and then some Instagram. That's when Instagram started taking off for us, and we had DMs saying, "Oh, I saw you posted."
And you would
this.
just like meet them locally to pick it up.
Be like, hey, you want me in the Target parking lot?
How about the honest coffee shop? Sure.
Like, there you go. And that's how we met some of our like returning customers that still shop with us today.
Really?
They've been around since we started kind of just doing meetups on Instagram.
Okay. And then so like how does that transition now? I mean, obviously like we're skipping a little bit ahead, but we'll catch back up. But for now, as far as online sales go, do you see a lot now? Since you have your website, did a lot of your sales come through your website, or do you still have Depop and eBay and Instagram kind of still playing a major role in that?
I would say I'm kind of the website guy. I created the website, and then Anna helps me make sure that the things on the website are still in stock and I'm not messing up. But I would say our website's our focus. We don't do much on Depop anymore. We've kind of seen a slowdown there.
Okay.
And it just makes more sense for us to be able to control more about where we sell, because website, right?
100%.
Everything that we want, like we can design it any way we want and not deal with fees or shipping fees on top of that. So we can also make our prices more competitive, more cheaper for our customers too.
And I guess with the website too, it's like if you're marketing it on Instagram, Facebook, wherever you were like pushing it out, probably Instagram being probably the biggest pool for y'all audience wise. I mean, directing everyone to your website, it's a one-stop shop. You can find everything. You can see that. I mean, I found the features of where you've been featured. Hopefully, you'll have the Beyond Rockets podcast after it comes out.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So we'll, it's a kind of that hub for everything. Like
Exactly.
you can kind of find everything. I was actually looking through and looking at the hats, looking at the shirts that y'all had yesterday or this morning.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of like, oh, is there anything that I kind of like? I was like, oh, I like that hat. I like that shirt.
Yeah.
I was like doing a little shopping spree myself. I was like, I gotta stop. I gotta stop. So you opened the storefront. I guess was that like you said it was in 2022.
2022. Yes.
Was the success after? I mean, you've been growing it over the years. You've been growing it from just before it was even one man's vintage to pre-pandemic to now in 2022. You open up your storefront. Finally, you're not having people come to your apartment. You never did that. You're not having to meet people out. Was the success of the storefront just right off the bat, or did it still take a little time to get people kind of accustomed to where you were located, where they could find you, and kind of, hey, we actually do have a storefront now?
Go ahead.
It's a funny story. So we actually were on the second floor of Clayton Row Shops because at the time there wasn't any room or any available spaces on the first floor. So there are some very steep steps to get onto the second floor. People who are familiar with Clayton Row Shops. And we actually had to break up the duo. So I actually sat by the sidewalk and had like a small rack of, cool vintage pieces from jerseys to crew necks to, some of our best pieces, and be like, hey, do you guys like this?
Oh,
go up the stairs.
There's
We
more
have
upstairs.
a storage unit up there that we converted into a small shop. So it was a lot of weeks of that. A lot of work just to kind of even convince people off the street, be like, hey, like there's a cool shop up there. Like once you get up there, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be amazing. Like you won't even expect that it's on the second floor. So we did that for a
few months
just
to get our name out.
Really?
Yeah. And then shortly after, we actually had an opportunity to go down to the first floor. Usually those spots don't really hardly open. Once you're on the first floor, you're kind of like set. But we had the opportunity to move down, and we're like, okay, cool. We're going to take it.
Yeah, we jumped on it.
Yeah, jumped
right
on
away.
it, build up on it. And it's kind of, that's where we are now. So we've expanded from two spaces to 3 spaces.
So you still have the ones upstairs?
It's
is it
more
just a
a storage unit
It's a
now.
storage.
Yeah.
Overflow.
It's just overflow
Yes.
now.
Okay, wow. So I mean, and when did you go full time into this when you came to, and I know you had an electrical engineering degree, and you were working on like on the arsenal or like as a government contractor, kind of like
the
in the defense
contractor. Yeah.
And then so when did y'all kind of both? I mean, it's a little bit of a backtrack, but when did y'all both sort of jump in and say, we can do this full time? This can be the thing that we are doing.
I recently this year.
Okay, congratulations.
It's been 7 months. We've been doing it full time.
And then I feel like I kind of jumped on right away.
Okay.
I feel like I saw the potential.
Yeah.
And I was still kind of new to Huntsville as well. So I'm like, okay, let me just kind of foster this for a little bit, adjust to, being in Alabama, adjusting to the summer.
Yeah.
That was one very cruel summer.
Yes.
But
Yes. So, jumping into it full time is a scary thing. I mean,
Yes,
I've been doing
for sure.
Beyond Rockets with the podcast and with marketing stuff full time for, I guess, 2 years now. And it is a tough jump, but like, I guess like, I think personally, I knew when we got to a certain point that I was like, okay, I really love doing this. I can do this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just go ahead and go for it. But I mean, as far as like Huntsville's concerned and being working for a defense contractor, I mean, that's as cliche as it is, it's the Huntsville dream. It's
a stable,
it's a stable
sure.
thing. It's hey, you can work this job for 30 years, get full retirement, come back and work for another 10 years and just have this amazing career and do everything you wanted to do outside of work. But at the end of the day, it's like, why not I just do what I love for work and then get to do everything else too?
Exactly.
So like, I mean, opening up a vintage store and like having that knowledge of vintage clothing, is that something that you're continuing to learn and continuing to like gain that knowledge over the years? And sort of how did you first acquire that skill or acquire that knowledge, either through books or through reaching out to people, or kind of how did you go about that?
It was a lot of work. I would say it's kind of just, you just go out there and you learn. So when we started, we were thrifting a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were taking a look at it's trial and error a lot. We would pick up pieces and then we would try to do some research and be like, this was not vintage. This was brand new, this was made in 2010. And then we start finding the vintage pieces and you start seeing similarities between them. There's the tags. A lot of vintage pieces are made in USA because they moved a lot of the factories overseas after the 90s. So the stitching on some pieces, same thing. Before 2000, they single stitched all their tees. Most of the tees, I'm not saying all of them, most of their tees. So we're able to look at kind of stitching on the sleeve and know that, okay, it's single, probably made before the 90s.
Oh, wow.
And then, so it's like a little details you start learning as you pick them up.
For the average person like myself going in, I'd be like, whatever.
Yeah, no one thinks to look at the stitching on your t-shirt.
Never even thought once about it. But now I feel like I'm going to have to when I go into a thrift store. I'm going to be like touching the sleeves and be like what are you doing? It's like, hey, I got this.
Yeah.
But is there still sort of that learning that you're having now too of like as pieces are coming in or like, finding out too what your audience is looking for. So, I mean, like every sort of vintage store probably has you probably have an audience of customers that are looking for a particular thing. Like, hey, we do better on jerseys. We do better on tees. We don't really do great on hats. So let's not look at hats. Like, is there sort of, what do you see your customer base kind of interested most in, and kind of how is that resembling what you actually have in the store?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think a lot of our customer base is more on the Gen Z side, younger millennials, kind of, catering to like, the big baggy clothes, the mom jeans, the bigger, baggier. We're kind of leaning more towards like the Y2K era.
Okay.
But we first initially started with collecting a lot of sports stuff because we're really big sports fans. So obviously the home of, Chicago Cubs, the Bulls, we needed
5 major sports teams.
Right.
Like the biggest sports teams in the world.
Right.
Y'all grew up in.
So that's how we started our collection. So we kind of have, a little bit of, we're kind of known for having a variety of sports teams, not only, just northern teams that kind of grew into the SEC, kind of grew into, out to Arizona, Colorado teams as well. West Coast teams. So we're always going to have an influx of, different sports teams from, basketball to baseball to football, always on hand. But when I first started taking over One Man's Vintage, I also wanted to have something for the girls. We want things, like little cutesy cartoon stuff. So
Disney, I was useless there.
Yeah.
I had no clue what she was trying to do. I just went with it.
And, if you want to go to Orlando, if you're going to California, you want to go to Disneyland, you need a good Mickey t-shirt, Mickey and Minnie. And then I have a big nostalgic feel with any old cartoons as well. So I'm always on the hunt for like Scooby-Doo, any like Cartoon Network type of t-shirts as well. So those are a big hit. But with our clientele, we're always going to have, looking for Levi jeans, looking for, now we're kind of building a true vintage feel as well. So those are like items from like the 60s and 70s, kind of with like the ringer, style.
Old stuff.
Yeah.
Really old.
The really old stuff. Yeah.
Does most of your sort of like when you're looking to collect things or find things, I mean, I feel like nowadays the idea for vintage clothing or vintage records or whatever you want to throw in the word vintage with, there's a slew of things you could talk about that are vintage. I mean, the popularity now is huge. There's a lot of people that just actively on their own like that stuff. They like looking for vintage clothing, vintage records, vintage furniture, whatever it might be. Has it become harder from when you first started kind of in college getting the stuff before it was really a thing? Has it become harder to find good stuff, or to find good stuff has cost you more of a premium now to get?
It's definitely gotten harder off the top of my head. I think anybody who's into vintage thrifting has seen that it's gotten more trendy, which is a good thing, right? We want people. I don't like when people try to gatekeep vintage, especially. That's kind of why we created the shop. We want it to be accessible for everybody. Everybody gets different styles and different pieces, and it's something that everybody can join and appreciate. Yeah. That's why the shop's there. But it's definitely gotten harder. We've had to get a little more creative with how we find things, where we're looking. We're not going to give away our trade secrets. But we have some connections of people that we can go to and say, hey, we need we need a bundle of t-shirts. Can you hook us up? And they're like, yeah, got you. So
yeah. And like, do people reach out to y'all of saying, hey, we're looking at getting rid of some stuff. Would you be able to take a look at it? Like, is that something that y'all do? Is that something that, like, if someone's listening and they're like, hey, we have a bunch of stuff that we don't want, or we don't really know what it is, can they reach out and like, hey, like, to find out if y'all will purchase?
Yeah. We do buy, sell, trade at the shop. So sometimes when either one of us is working, we'll have people come in with like kind of tubs of stuff like, hey, I was looking to get rid of this. And we go through it, kind of select what we want to keep, what we are kind of going to pass on. But I always tell people we're like Plato's Closet. So people are very familiar with Plato's Closet.
Vintage Plato's Closet.
Yeah, we're a vintage Plato's Closet for sure.
Yes, for sure. So, I mean, when y'all, I mean, obviously getting the location on the first floor was a huge step for the business. Mm-hmm. I mean, but obviously with that becomes probably a little bit more overhead too. I mean, the location is premium. Like, it's, for anyone that's listening and knows Clinton Road shops, it can be a confusing thing to find people. It's not the most. I remember when Manny was there and he was in the basement, and I was like, "You're just gonna have to come out here and get me because I have no idea where."
No one knows
at.
there's a basement.
Like, it was like 40. It was like 40 turns. Take a left. Take a right. Around the corner from this. Like, where in the world
and then you're
are
back
you?
at the
And
same
then I'm like,
place.
I have not gone anywhere. I have standstill. But obviously the first floor is a little bit easier to find and kind of. How was it kind of that initial work that you were doing on the street, kind of getting people to know about you, did that kind of roll over with that first floor location now, where you're not having to do that as much, and you're kind of able to, people have known that you're there? I mean, how long have you been at that first floor?
We've been there.
Has it been since 2022?
A year.
A year.
Yes.
Okay.
July of 2022, we moved down to the first floor.
So has the last year just been? Have you seen that influx of either new customers, returning customers, with having that first floor location?
Yes, for sure.
Definitely.
I know when we first moved there, we would hear kind of like the footsteps still kind of going up to the second floor. And people were still looking for us on the second floor.
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of good to know that first location, initial location, kind of stuck with people.
Yeah, even now, sometimes people have come back from school and been like, oh, I remember I went to a vintage shop here. I don't know where they are. So we had to put a little flyer up there that said, we've moved down first floor. Please come down, check us out.
Yeah.
Bigger, better.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of like tourists as well that are in Huntsville kind of take, that first floor little round and kind of go around the circle there. So we're seeing a lot of new customers as well, and also returning customers just from people who have met us at Little Mill or done like summer markets as well. There, it's kind of more of a easier to find.
So is it still just y'all in the business, or do you have other people that kind of help either manage the store, help you find, like, is there sort of a team behind it, or is it just is what I'm looking at one man's vintage?
It's just us
It's
right
just
now.
us,
We do social media. We're the marketers. We stock the store. Everything is just us right now.
I mean, has it been like, if there's one store? I mean, obviously, like with being the business owner, you often you're wearing multiple hats. You're kind of taking off this hat and putting on this hat. You're taking off, like, you're constantly doing that. Has there been one hat for both of you that has been a very tough hat to wear, but has now become a kind of a hat that you're more comfortable with over the years now?
I'll start with that one. I guess we can both answer that. I will say customer service. I've grown up, I never did any kind of customer service role. Yeah. No retail. Obviously, as an engineer, it was more science, technology focused.
You just don't talk to anybody.
Right. And having the shop and having to interact with people has definitely broken me out of my shell. I think Anna has noticed too. I'm able to hold conversations and like small talk and just I feel just talk to people. Yeah. Just about nothing, honestly, but just be able to talk. Chit chat. Yeah, and I've gotten a lot better at that, and that's something I couldn't imagine myself doing 3 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that is a tough thing, especially like, I graduated from UAH and went there basically completely in the pandemic. Graduated in 2021, mm-hmm. So like my 2 years, I did 2 years at Calhoun, 2 years at UAH, and 2 years at UAH was completely online.
Yeah,
Calhoun I did online, but I was always working. But like there is that lack of communication, lack of interaction that everyone sort of experienced for a little while.
Yeah.
And so kind of, opening up a storefront because of the popularity and the demand on the second floor for y'all, then you're kind of like, okay, like I'm having to kind of chit chat with people. And then now you're on the first floor and you're just seeing people that and as Huntsville's continue to grow with y'all, the amount of people that I see downtown, I'm always downtown, and the amount of people I see downtown that I have never seen ever, I'm like, where are these people coming from? Like there's times of the year where like, especially when it's cooler, when it's warm like this, people are always out. Like in the fall and the summer, there's people everywhere. In the winter, you see a lot of regulars where it's like, oh, like I remember seeing you a couple weeks ago. I remember seeing you. But right now, I mean, it's just an influx of people. For you, I mean, is there a hat that you wear now in the business that is, you know, you didn't really know as much about, you weren't as comfortable with, but now you've kind of come to embrace a little bit?
I think it would probably be the more like website and also taxes.
Oh, man.
Taxes, yeah.
I think just that more, you know, the back end of a business.
All the business, yeah.
Yeah. I always had retail jobs growing up. So I feel like I was very comfortable with talking with people, you know, kind of doing that small chat. But the whole behind, you know, being my own manager, being my own boss kind of deal, I think that was a little bit more of a kind of learning curve to kind of get around, just because there are so many logistics that go behind a store. And any of our, you know, small business owners kind of would agree that it's not only we're on 24/7, but we also have to be on when we get home and be our laptops and tablets and making sure the next day is prepared for and stuff
100%.
like that.
Yeah. I will say Anna, like she said, she has retail experience, so she knows what it takes to run a shop.
Yeah.
And she's definitely told me, she's like, this needs to happen. It needs to go like this. I'm like, go ahead. I'm down for it.
You tell me what to do and I will do it.
She's like, gotta smell good. We gotta clean every day. And I was like, and that stuff, I mean, I wouldn't even thought about that. Like, I'd be like, yeah, I want it to be clean. But she was like, we gotta get a vacuum. We gotta wipe down the mirror. And I was like, what? Like, that's so obvious, but like it's just something I'm just like, why did I not think about that? But she's kept us in check for sure.
And so I know a big part of kind of not necessarily a shift from the conversation, but sort of a separate topic is the downtown vintage markets that y'all have done. I think there was one maybe. I'm trying to think if I remember. It was a few months ago. There was one.
It was June 24th.
June 24th, and it was down there in the parking lot, kind of behind. Like Jefferson and Holmes?
Yes, right across from Melt.
Right across from Melt. And then there's one coming up in September 8th?
9th.
Okay. So tell me a little bit, inform people that are listening, kind of what that market is, what they can experience, and kind of if someone is listening and they want to maybe even do a booth or whatever, like talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Okay. So our Huntsville's downtown vintage market is something we've had been dreaming of for even before the shop started.
Yeah.
We thought it would be so cool. We've been to markets before, and we just thought it would be so great to have our own, especially downtown Huntsville.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we were like, Huntsville needs something. They're in Nashville, they're in Chattanooga, they're in Birmingham. Huntsville needs something like this. So that was kind of born out of our love of vintage, and it just started with us being like, hey, some friends who also do vintage, would you be into it?
Yeah.
Would you consider it? And they were like, of course, like you guys got it? Like, of course we're gonna do it. So the market, the 9th, will be at the Green Street parking garage right there across from OTBX.
Okay.
It'll be 11 to 5. We have about 30 vintage vendors, including clothing, home decor, collectibles. We're going to have food and music, and we're trying to grow it, make it bigger and better than the other one. If you are interested in becoming a vendor, signups are on our Instagram and on our website. So definitely check that out. We're still accepting a few spots.
Is the 9th a Saturday?
It is a Saturday.
Okay. So I was thinking through. I'm pretty sure that this episode should come out the Monday before that. So that'd be a perfect timing.
Nice.
Perfect.
And I will make sure it does so that we can make sure we address that. Was the June 24th? Was that the first one you ever did?
That was our first
How
one.
was the sort of the response from the community?
It was great. It was awesome.
It's crazy.
Like how Caleb said before, there's a vintage fest that happens in Chicago called Illinois Vintage Fest. Shane Kelly, shout out to Shane Kelly. He is the one who kind of owns it and puts it on. So going to those markets, we're like, oh my God, yeah, it's a great time to, go to check out all these booths and stuff like that. So that's how, we kind of wanted to make one in our own backyard. But the response was incredible.
Really?
It was all these people were like, oh my God, yes. Like we miss going to vintage markets. Like
wow.
This needs to happen more often. Like you guys should do it every week. Like,
we like, whoa.
We were tired.
Yeah, it was like a 16-hour day that day.
So
is the goal to do these markets like every once a quarter? Is it to do it so like 4 times a year? Kind of do this market.
That's what we would like to do. We would like to do one like every few months, almost every season about.
Okay.
So maybe a spring, summer, fall, winter one. So we're working with Downtown Huntsville Incorporated to kind of get those on the schedule and
That's
kinda
awesome.
keep going with those.
Yeah, I think I remember that market, the one in June, because I do weekly episodes of the podcast, and I included that into the list of events that were going on.
We
that
saw
weekend.
that. We're like, oh, we made it.
So it was a cool thing, and I'm excited. I'm like, I think we were out of town that weekend. We weren't able to make it, but I think the September 9th one we'll definitely be able to make it and check it out. So I mean, looking at this journey you've had from, just doing this as a fun hobby in college to, hey, let's make this a real thing, to let's open up a storefront, to let's expand the storefront, to let's do a market downtown, to where we are today. What is this? August the 4th, 2023. How much of your success would you contribute to being in the right place at the right time, and versus how much would you contribute to your hard work?
That's
You wanna answer that one?
That's a
You
tough
got
one. I'm a big believer if it's meant to be, it'll be. So I feel like a lot of opportunities that have come our way, I'm like, okay, this is definitely a perfect time. Like that, this opportunity comes our way. But on the other hand, Caleb's very much more on it's all of our hard work that we've like kind of put behind the scenes, which is very true. We always work 24/7. I think it might be a little bit of both.
A little 50-50 sort of thing?
Yeah, I think it might be a little bit of both of kind of, being there at the right time or introducing ourselves to the right person. But if we didn't put ourselves out there, that opportunity would have never, come our way either. So
I'm a believer, kind of like Ann said, in hard work, but also like being ready to go when the opportunity shows itself. So you put in all this hard work to get where you are. And then like with the first floor, with our change from the second floor to the first floor, we didn't expect to be on the first floor that soon. It came 6 months after we had just opened up, right? And we were thinking at least a year. We were mentally prepared.
Yeah.
We're like, we're gonna be up for a year. Let's put in the hard work to get people up here. And we got a call from our landlord, David Johnson of Clinton Road Shops, and he was like, "Hey, we got a spot. Are you guys interested?" And we're like, "Of course,
we will move today."
We're like, we are ready, and we kind of already have those plans in our minds. Like, if this opportunity comes, we're gonna take it, and here's what we're gonna do with it.
Yeah. So thinking through, I mean, we're over halfway through 2023, which is crazy to think about. I mean, we're in August 2023, 4 months or so left of the year. What are some goals that you have for One Man's Vintage in the rest of 2023, as well as what are some goals you have for the company, in the next maybe year to 3 years?
Okay, and I know you have a big one, a big goal of yours. So go ahead and share that.
We're kind of hidden at Clinton Row Shops. We're in the back hall. So if you're walking by Honest Coffee, Sea Salt, you won't really see us from the main street. So a big goal of mine is to have our own front space, like a front facing window space. Just so, you don't get lost. I know Clinton Row Shops is a little tricky to navigate here and there. So that's one of our biggest goals is to, have our own plants in the front.
Yes, natural sunlight.
Natural light. Sometimes we lose track of time back there. I call 100%. I call it our cave because we don't have access to a window. But that's probably one of our biggest goals. Yeah,
that's a priority for us. It kind of also adds to like our dream, like having our own shop in the middle of downtown Huntsville. But like not only just being in downtown, but being a part of downtown, like having that window and seeing, like you said, like the regulars walk by and be like, "Oh, see them going Honest Coffee? They do that, every day at 9 a.m." Like and being like really ingrained in downtown.
Yeah,
and I think that kind of goes into like one of my main goals is we want to work with the community more. We would love to do things like the food drives, the toy drives, and we just don't have the space right now to do things like that. So that would be something we would love to do, just be more involved in the community downtown, especially with DHI.
So I think we talked about it at the beginning of the episode, or maybe it was off air. It's all kind of blending together. But you didn't think you were going to end up back here in Huntsville. You were born here, but didn't think you were going to end up back here. Obviously, I mean, I don't think Huntsville was on your radar. Now that you've been a part of Huntsville, you've kind of, like you said, you brought yourself into the community, made the community part of what you are. Do you think you'll do you think you'll ever leave is Huntsville just so much of a part of you now that you're like, this is where I'm going to be, this is where we want to grow One Man's Vintage, this is where we want to plant our roots, this is where we plan on being?
Good one.
I would say off the top of my head, yes. Like before the shop, I was thinking about moving, like maybe Colorado. I really looked at Colorado. I really liked it, and the shop kind of popped off, and it made us kind of expand our horizons with Huntsville. It got us to like explore different parts of Huntsville that maybe we weren't familiar with, like Lincoln Mill here, kind of thing. This is our second time being here, first time being inside.
Yeah.
So like an area that we weren't familiar with, and we're here because of the shop. So, and the people we've met downtown too, the history we've learned from some people that have been here for a while, has like almost grown our love of Huntsville. And I just really appreciate what it is.
I feel like a part of me is always going to want to go back to Chicago, just because obviously I had to go catch a Bulls game every once in a while. But I know my family still loves it. They're still up there, but when they come down, they're like, "Oh my God, we love Huntsville!" And there's, Huntsville a little bit of is everywhere.
100%.
So my mom works in the healthcare department back home, and she's met actually quite a few people that have been to Huntsville, that have been to Space Camp, and they're like, "Oh my God, yes, that's the Rocket City." So I feel like even if we try to move away, I feel like Huntsville is always going to be wherever we are. But we're wherever One Man's Vintage is, for sure. Like One Man's Vintage is Huntsville. Huntsville is One Man's Vintage. So
perfect. So the last question I always ask, if anyone's listening and they want to shop the store, they want to visit your website, they want to follow you on Instagram, where can they find you, and where are you at on social media and in person?
Yeah, well, we're at Clinton Row Shops. We operate Wednesday through Saturday, 12 to 6 p.m. And then on Sundays, we're open 12 to 4. You can find us on Instagram at one man's _ vintage.
Perfect.
And then our website is just onemansvintage.com.
Perfect. Yeah. And we'll have all their information in the episode notes. So you can follow them, find all their social links, find their website, find their location and everything in the episode notes. I thank you for spending the last 40 plus minutes talking with me. It flies by.
Yeah, it did not feel like 40 minutes. This was so much fun.
It flew by, but I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk with me today. I continue to look forward to the success you'll have in Huntsville for years to come, and the ability for you just to grow and be a part of the community. So thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you for having us. Like I said, this was so much fun.
Yeah, this is great. I love the setup. If you're in Huntsville, definitely come check us out, and definitely follow Beyond Rockets on Instagram.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being here.
Yes, thank you.